I knew something was wrong. The second my ATV snapped sideways on the bridge, no warning, no traction, just a violent skid over a creek swollen from last night's storm. I barely kept from going over the railing. When I looked down, the truth hit me harder than the impact a fresh sheet of motor oil poured exactly where my tires would spots. Someone had come onto my land in the middle of the night. Someone who wanted me off this bridge permanently. And I didn't need a trail cam to know who it was. Because the next morning, before the oil even dried, an envelope arrived from the HOA president, accusing me of illegal construction. And that was the least insane part. Her name was Karen Klemp, president of the Birch Meadow HOA, a title she carried like a sheriff's badge and a scepter combined. She wasn't my neighbor, wasn't my authority, and sure as hell wasn't invited onto my land. But that never stopped her. Karen believed Birch Meadow wasn't just a subdivision, it was her kingdom. And anything within eyesight of her perfectly trimmed yard somehow fell under her jurisdiction. She was famous for it. Fining a guy for non-compliant grass height, banning wind chimes because they agitated the atmosphere, trying to outlaw beehives because they threatened communal serenity. Power didn't corrupt her, it moisturized her. So when I built a legal, county-approved steel bridge on my own 22 acres, she didn't see private property. She saw a new frontier to conquer. And for the first time, she found someone who wouldn't bend. I moved back to Oregon after my last deployment because I wanted something real land. I could work with my hands, a place where the creek, the trees, and the quiet actually meant something. I hoped to reclaim the back third of my family's 22 acres and build a small house there for my sister and her kids, finally connecting the front lot to the forested stretch we'd never been able to reach in the rainy season. At first, everything went exactly how it should. Permits, approved inspections passed, county sign-offs clean, and the steel bridge I spent months on finally giving us full access year-round. Then, the first envelope from Birch Meadow Estates arrived, and I learned that Karen Klemp could turn even someone else's land into a battlefield. The letter looked official, thick paper, embossed header, the kind of stationery designed to make normal people sweat. I opened it at my workbench expecting junk mail. Instead, it demanded $25,000 for an unauthorized infrastructure project affecting Visual Harmony. Visual Harmony. My bridge sat half a mile from their subdivision. The only way anyone from Birch Meadow could even see it was if they climbed onto their roof with binoculars and delusions of authority. I reread it twice, then laughed, sharp, disbelieving. But the signature at the bottom killed the humor instantly. Karen Klemp, HOA president. She wasn't posturing. The letter threatened legal action if I didn't remediate the structure. Remediate meant remove it. They wanted the bridge gone. I pulled the county plat maps, checked the permits, double-checked everything. My land was completely outside Birch Meadow's boundaries, 215 feet outside to be exact. I wasn't their member. I wasn't under their rules. I wasn't even near their jurisdiction. So I wrote a clean, documented response. Cease contact. Your claims are fraudulent. I attached the county maps and permit approvals for emphasis. I mailed it feeling damn good. 3 days later, the HOA escalated. A thick packet arrived titled Birch Meadow Estates, Amended Charter, Addendum Watershed Protection, and Visual Integrity Zone. Even the name smelled like propaganda. They claimed they had expanded their jurisdiction to include any land within 200 feet of Harmon Creek, conveniently scooping my property inside their eco-boundary. But the addendum was backdated 6 months. And the signatures, 2 belonged to men who were no longer alive or living in the county. I checked county records. No amendment filed, no vote scheduled, no public notice. It wasn't an amendment, it was a forgery. And it meant Karen wasn't acting out of annoyance. She was building a legal fantasy to take control of my land. I drove straight to my attorney, Reese Huntington, former military deadly calm and allergic to HOA nonsense. He flipped through the forged addendum like he was reading a bedtime story written by criminals. This isn't overreach, he said. This is textbook fraud. He drafted a formal notice demanding all HOA communication go through him, warning their actions bordered on civil extortion. I thought that would scare them. I was wrong. 2 mornings later, I nearly died. The motor oil on the bridge was fresh, poured in a perfect stripe across the decking where any vehicle would cross. It wasn't sloppy. It was deliberate. Someone had stood on my bridge in the middle of the night with a jug of oil and a plan. The next morning they struck again. Nails, dozens, scattered across my gravel drive like confetti at Satan's birthday party. Roofing nails with plastic strips still attached, not fallen placed. That was the moment a line snapped inside me. I bought high-end trail cams, the kind hunters use to spot predators at night. I mounted them at the gate at the bridge near the shed. Then I sat in my shop that night, lights off, listening. 3 nights later, my phone pinged. The footage showed a figure in a dark jacket, stepping onto the bridge, crouching to take photos. Another person stood at the tree line holding what looked like a clipboard. They weren't vandals, they were documenting. For Karen. The next day, I asked my closest neighbor across the creek, Chad Buckton, if he recognized the guy in the still frame. Chad snorted. "That's Trent," he said. "Karen's been telling the HOA you built an illegal industrial crossing, got everyone spooked, told them to document suspicious activity. Industrial. It was a 1-lane bridge for my pickup. Things went from stupid to insane. Another envelope arrived. Not a letter. A lawsuit. Birch Meadow Estates, HOA versus Cody Wells. They demanded the bridge be removed, claimed it harmed the environment, and repeated the $25,000 penalty. They even argued my bridge diminished community value, as if my steel beams gave their lawn flamingos anxiety. I slapped the packet onto Reese's desk. "They want my bridge gone," I said. "Over my dead body." Reese didn't blink. "Good. Then we counter." He filed claims for fraudulent jurisdiction attempt, harassment, property interference, civil extorsion. Then he called in reinforcements. Dr. Tracy Miller, a renowned hydrologist, showed up in flannel and a field vest full of scientific gear. She spent hours testing soil, checking banks, scanning runoff patterns. She barely spoke until she stepped under the bridge, ran her hand along the riprap I'd laid, and nodded once. "You did this right," she said. "Better than most contractors." Her report came the next morning. The bridge improved erosion control and increased aquatic passage. Net environmental benefit. Karen's eco-boundary argument obliterated. But she wasn't done. The next attack came wrapped in county letterhead. A sudden order from the Regional Compliance Office. My permits were under suspension pending investigation of unlicensed construction. I drove to the county building department immediately. Inspector Lyrie, the man who signed off on my bridge, frowned at the letter. "This didn't come from us," he said quietly. "Someone bypassed procedure. This was escalated directly." Then he lowered his voice. "I've been hearing one name all week, Karen Klemp. That same night, my neighbor Ed texted me. He used to bartend at a trendy place in town and overheard Karen sliding a folder across the table to a county official whispering about a contribution to justify re-examining my permits." Reese's eyes lit up when I repeated it. We had pattern, we had motive, we had witnesses. And then the final piece fell into place. Old-timer Frank Birch, the original founder of Birch Meadow, showed up with a folder of old private HOA meeting minutes. In one, Karen said, "If we can justify environmental oversight, we can force inclusion and regain control of the corridor." Corridor meant my land. This wasn't about a bridge. It was about conquest. Reese stacked the evidence: forged documents, sabotage, bribery attempts, false environmental claims, witness statements, trail cam footage. Decade-old HOA plans to absorb my property. Then he reached out to the media. Within 24 hours, a headline hit the local news: HOA president accused of targeting veterans' property with fraudulent eco-rules. Karen wanted a war. Now she had one. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and old paper, the kind of place where truth doesn't care who thinks they're in charge. I walked into hearing room 2B with Reese on my right and Dr. Tracy Miller on my left, flanked by a quiet army of neighbors who'd finally had enough of Birch Meadow's tyranny. Karen was already seated at the petitioner's table. Navy pantsuit, pearls, lips pursed like she'd tasted a lemon, and blamed the chef. Her lawyer stood when the judge entered, bowing his head with all the dignity of a man about to humiliate himself. He opened with a speech dripping in fake nobility, calling my bridge a monument to unilateral development that threatened environmental balance and community cohesion. Translation: Karen didn't like looking at it from her deck. I didn't move, didn't blink. Reese just smiled like he'd been waiting for dessert. When it was our turn, he stood, clicked on the projector, and calmly detonated their case. First slide county plat maps highlighted in bright yellow. My land clearly outside the HOA boundary. Mr. Wells, Reese said, is not, has never been, and cannot ever be part of Birch Meadow Estates. Karen shifted. Not much, just enough to show a crack. Next came the bridge permits, stamped, signed, and re-verified by Inspector Lyrie. As of last week, Reese said the county reaffirmed the permit's validity after an attempted manipulation of their process. Another crack. Then came Dr. Tracy Miller. She adjusted her glasses, stepped to the microphone, and in a voice sharp enough to cut stone, delivered the verdict that buried their environmental argument. "This bridge," she said, pointing at the display, "stabilizes the creek bank, reduces erosion, and improves aquatic passage. It is a net environmental benefit. Any claim of harm is scientifically baseless. The judge nodded, writing quickly. Karen's lawyer objected, claiming potential underground hydrological impact on Birch Meadows retention pond. Reese didn't even look up. He clicked to the topographic survey. A ridge, undeniable, ran between my creek and their subdivision. No water flows toward Birch Meadow, Reese said. None, not even during flood stage. The judge raised an eyebrow at the HOA table. The silence was gorgeous. Then Reese went for the jugular. He introduced Ed's statement, the bartender who overheard Karen offering a contribution to a county official if he would re-examine my permits. Karen's lawyer went pale. Next, Reese presented Inspector Lyrie's sworn affidavit detailing how he was invited to lunch by a woman representing a community coalition offering departmental donations and career benefits in exchange for reopening my file. The judge's pen stopped. That's when you know someone's in trouble. But the final nail came from old-timer Frank Birch. Suspenders, gravelly voice, zero patience for liars. He read directly from the private HOA minutes he'd saved. If we can justify environmental oversight, we can force inclusion and regain control of the corridor. Karen's face didn't move, but her knuckles turned white. Reese walked back to our table calm as a man who'd already dug the grave. Karen stood suddenly. Your Honor, she began our community's democratic structure. The judge cut her off. Ma'am, the defendant is not part of your community by law or geography. You could have heard a pin drop. He delivered the ruling like a hammer to stone, all HOA claims dismissed. The eco-boundary addendum is invalid and unenforceable. The HOA is fined $100,000 for harassment, interference, and fraudulent conduct. The matter of attempted influence over county officials is referred to prosecutors. Birch Meadow Estates is ordered to submit to a third-party operational audit. When the gavel hit the bench behind me, erupted quiet claps at first, then louder. Ed slapped my back. Frank nodded like justice was finally catching up to old sins. Loretta let out a victorious little ha. Karen didn't look at any of us. She gathered her briefcase with trembling hands and walked out a storm cloud in pearls. The bridge had stood through rain, sabotage, and lies. Now it stood through court. And so did I. A month after the hearing, the valley finally felt quiet again. Real quiet. Not the tense sort that hangs right before a storm. The bridge stood exactly where I built it, solid steel and concrete, catching the morning light the same way it did on the first day I crossed it. Only now it wasn't just a project. It was a victory monument. I tightened the last screw on the new plaque I ordered, thick brushed metal, the kind meant to outlive every argument ever thrown at it. Built with love. Protected by court order. Not for HOA use. Underneath in smaller lettering, $100 000 view included. Petty maybe. But petty has its place in the natural order of things. A county worker rolled up a few days later, stepped out of his truck, and installed an official marker at the road, private land outside HOA jurisdiction. A gift from the judge himself. The worker peeled the backing off a small sticker and slapped it onto the sign with a grin. No Karen zone, he said. Compliments of the county. Slow, quiet change started rolling through Birch Meadow after that. Rules eased. Fines faded. People planted gardens in colors that weren't board-approved sage. Someone even installed a neon blue swing set that clashed so violently with the HOA handbook it should have come with a trigger warning, and nobody said a word, not even a whisper, because Karen was gone. She resigned before the audit even started citing stress and a need for self-care. Rumor was she left town for a while, though. One neighbor swore they saw her at a wellness retreat, teaching a class called Healthy Boundaries. Irony so thick you could pave a driveway with it. My neighbors started showing up in small waves over the next few weeks. Frank brought honey and a bottle of rye. Loretta handed me a stack of old finds Karen had given her, laughed, then tossed them into my fire barrel like she was burning old love letters. Ed offered to weld me a gate sign that read, "Choke on it, Karen." Tempting but unnecessary. The red paint I added to the fence after the hearing said enough. Life shifted back to normal and then better than normal. I finalized the permits for my sister's house on the back lot, the whole reason I built the bridge in the first place. We broke ground last week. The sound of her kids running along the dirt path to the creek hit me harder than any courtroom victory. Some nights I walk the bridge alone, listening to the creek moving underneath. The water sounds different now, sharper, cleaner, like it finally carved through all the noise around it. I can still picture that first time, the ATV skidded sideways, coffee flying, adrenaline punching through my ribs. I can picture the nails on the gravel, the forged documents, the smug letters. But mostly I picture the moment the judge said 6 words that stuck in my bones. He is not part of your community. Some people heard a legal statement. I heard a door closing. The truth is, Karen never cared about the bridge. Not really. She cared about control, about expanding her little kingdom inch by inch, until even the trees had to ask permission to grow. My bridge just happened to be the first thing she couldn't bend, and maybe the first thing she couldn't break. One evening, just before fall settled in for real, I stood in the middle of the bridge as the sunset hit the steel beams. The whole structure glowed like it had been forged from fire instead of sweat and stubbornness. The creek rushed below, steady and unbothered. I ran my hand along the railing, the metal cool under my palm. "I built you for family," I muttered. "Not for war." But war came anyway, and in the end, the bridge held. Funny thing is, so did I. As the last bit of daylight dropped behind the ridge, I looked toward Birch Meadow, toward the neat rows of homes, where a certain pearl-wearing tyrant once ruled like a queen. For the first time in a long time, the view looked perfect. After all, the HOA tried to take my land, my bridge, and my peace. Instead, they funded my upgrades. And every morning now, when the sun hits that metal just right, I can't help but smile. Because Karen fought the bridge, and the bridge won.